It began on a calm Saturday evening in Brookhaven Heights, a quiet neighborhood just north of Atlanta. The streetlights glowed amber, the air was still, and most people were winding down from a long week. But that peace shattered the moment two self-appointed community enforcers decided to play heroes. Their target? A woman who had every right to be there. Her name was Monica Hayes, a seasoned police captain from the Atlanta Metropolitan Division. She had served nearly 22 years on the force. But that night she wasn't in uniform. She wasn't on duty. She was simply Monica, visiting an old friend after a long week, keys in one hand, a bottle of wine in the other, phone tucked under her arm. Her friend Lisa Turner had already buzzed her through the gated entrance. The gate swung open with a soft hum, and Monica drove slowly through, enjoying the rare quiet of the suburbs. She parked along the curb outside Lisa's brick front home, stepped out and started walking up the driveway. Then she heard it. Boots scuffing against pavement. Two men stepped out from behind a dark SUV, their silhouettes cutting across the dim glow of the streetlights. They wore tactical vests that looked straight out of an online surplus store. The words, "Neighborhood Patrol," stitched across the front in crooked white letters. The taller one barked, "Ma'am, this is private property. We're going to need to see some identification." The tone wasn't polite. It wasn't cautious. It was commanding, like an order. Monica stopped. She scanned their mismatched gear, the flashlights clipped to their belts and the handcuffs swinging like toys. No badges, no insignias, no sign of real authority. Something in her gut twisted. "I'm visiting a friend," she said calmly, pointing to Lisa's house at the end of the driveway. "She lives right there." She buzzed me in. The shorter man, later identified as Derek Coleman, chuckled under his breath. "That's what they all say." His partner, Chad Winters, puffed up his chest and stepped closer. "You're trespassing. Either hand over your ID or we'll detain you until the sheriff arrives." For a split second, Monica considered pulling out her badge. It was right there in her purse, but years of experience whispered caution. These men didn't look like they wanted proof. They wanted control, so she stayed composed. "You're mistaken," she said softly. "I'm a guest." Derek scoffed. "You think you can just stroll into a gated community like this?" Behind him, a porch light flicked on. Curtains shifted. A neighbor peeked from behind a window. Another stepped out with a dog, stopping mid-stride. The quiet street was waking up, one uncomfortable stare at a time. Chad tilted his head, voice laced with mock authority. "Look, ma'am, you can cooperate, or this can get a whole lot worse. Your choice." Monica's heartbeat stayed steady, but her eyes hardened. "You're not law enforcement," she said. "You have no right to detain me." Derek snorted, pulling a pair of plastic zip ties from his vest. "We'll see about that." The sound of plastic snapping through the air sliced the silence in two. At that moment, Monica realized this wasn't just arrogance. It was something darker. They truly believed they were the law. From across the street, a young woman raised her phone and started recording. Her hands trembled, but she didn't stop. The glowing lens became an unblinking witness as this confrontation unfolded. Chad's boot scraped the driveway as he squared up. His vest bulky and cheap, his tone dripping with authority he didn't possess. "Last chance," he said. "Show ID or we'll detain you for trespassing." Monica's voice didn't waver. "You're harassing a guest on private property. You should walk away," but they didn't. Derek smirked. "Lady, people like you always think the rules don't apply." The phrase hit like a slap. "People like you. Coded, cruel, and all too familiar." She stood taller, keeping her voice low but sharp. "You're making a mistake you won't be able to take back." The tension hung thick in the humid air. Neighbors whispered from their porches. Someone called out, "She said she's visiting." Chad shot a glare toward the voices. "Mind your business," he barked, but the camera stayed up. The eyes stayed fixed, and when Derek snapped the zip tie again, louder this time, it was clear. They wanted a show. Monica braced herself, her training coiled beneath the surface like a spring. What she didn't know yet was that the world would soon watch this night unfold, frame by frame, and what began as a confrontation on a quiet street would soon ignite a national reckoning. The night air tightened around them as if even the breeze was holding its breath. Monica could feel the weight of every stare from the surrounding houses. She wasn't just standing in front of two imposters now. She was standing before an audience, one that would decide whether to stay silent or intervene. Derek took another step forward, his hand flexing around the zip ties like he couldn't wait to use them. His grin widened when Monica didn't flinch. "You can make this easy or we can make it hard," he said. "Your call." Monica met his gaze, calm and unwavering. "You're crossing a line that's going to cost you more than you realize," Chad sneered, a flash of something cruel passing through his eyes. "You think you can scare us with that tone?" He jabbed a finger toward her. "Show ID now." Monica's patience thinned, but she held steady. "You don't have the authority to demand that." From across the street, someone whispered, "They're not real cops, are they?" The murmur spread and a few more porch lights flicked on. Shadows moved behind curtains. The quiet neighborhood was watching, judging, and recording every second. Derek took another step closer, snapping the tie once more just to fill the silence. "Hands out," he ordered. "Let's not make this ugly." Monica's tone stayed even. "You touch me and that will be the last mistake you make tonight." He laughed, a harsh, forced sound. "Oh, she's tough. Thinks she can talk her way out." Chad circled to her side, trying to corner her in the driveway. His breath carried the faint smell of coffee and arrogance. "Don't resist. This is for your own good," he said. Monica shifted her stance slightly, grounding her feet. Every instinct from her 20 years on the force came alive. The posture, the awareness, the patience. "You're not protecting anyone," she said quietly. "You're performing." That word hit harder than she expected. Derek's face twitched, pride cracking under the accusation. "Performing?" he spat. "We're keeping this neighborhood safe from people who don't belong here." There it was again. People who don't belong. Her jaw tightened, but she stayed measured. "You're not safety officers. You're men with fear and vests confusing power for purpose." The crowd murmured again. Phones lifted higher. One neighbor whispered, "She's right," and the words rippled through the street. Chad's face reddened. "Enough talk," he said. He lunged forward, reaching for her wrist, but Monica moved with quiet precision, stepping sideways just enough that his momentum carried him off balance. His boot scraped the edge of the driveway and he stumbled forward, nearly falling. The audience gasped. "You just assaulted me," he shouted, his voice cracking. Monica's eyes locked on him. "No, you tripped over your own ego." Derek's temper flared. "That's it," he barked. "You're under citizen's arrest." The irony almost made her laugh. "You don't even know what that means," she replied, but they weren't listening anymore. Derek grabbed her arm roughly, trying to twist it behind her back. The cheap plastic bit into her skin as he forced the zip tie around her wrist. The sting of it was sharp, but not as sharp as the humiliation flooding through her. From behind, someone yelled, "Let her go! She hasn't done anything!" Chad snapped, "Back off! We've got this under control." The crowd's energy shifted. Fear turned to anger. Phones zoomed in closer. A man with a dog crossed the street, shaking his head. "This ain't right," he muttered. She didn't do a thing. Monica could feel the burn on her wrists as the ties tightened. She kept her voice calm, steady, cutting through their noise. "You've just committed assault and unlawful restraint. Do you understand what that means?" Derek waved her words away, puffing up his chest. "You think you can throw big words at us and scare us? Nobody's buying it," she didn't blink. "Then you're about to find out the hard way." The woman recording stepped closer now, voice trembling but loud enough for everyone to hear. "I've got everything on camera," she said. "Every second." "You're done." Chad turned toward her. "Put that phone down." She didn't move. "No. The world's gonna see this." Monica exhaled slowly, steadying herself as the tension pulsed through the crowd. The men had no idea who they were dealing with, and in their arrogance they'd just ensured their own downfall. Chad's radio crackled uselessly. It wasn't even on. Derek yanked the second zip tie tight around her other wrist. She winced at the sting, but the calm in her eyes never broke. "You're making a mistake that's going to follow you forever," she said, her voice level but filled with quiet power. "Save it," Derek said smugly. "You're not going anywhere until the real cops get here." Monica glanced toward the end of the street. Faint red and blue lights flickered in the distance, reflections bouncing off car windows. "They're already on their way," she said softly. Her words made Chad pause just for a moment. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," she said, lifting her bound wrist slightly, "you're about to find out exactly who I am." The distant wail of sirens began to grow louder. The sound rolled through the neighborhood like a warning. Neighbors froze. Cameras stayed raised, and for the first time that night, the fake officers looked unsure of themselves. Because the real ones were coming, and this time, the law wasn't on their side. The faint flashing lights grew brighter, washing across the driveways, and even the air seemed to shift as authority finally approached. But what would unfold next would not just end their charade. It would reveal just how fragile false power can be when it meets the truth. The sirens were still faint, but their echo carried through the neighborhood like a heartbeat getting closer. Chad straightened his vest, pretending not to notice. Derek looked toward the flashing lights, his confidence wavering. Neighbors murmured, their whispers turning sharp. Someone said, "She warned them," and another voice added, "They really tied her up?" Monica stood calm in the center of it all, her wrists bound, but her presence unbroken. The burning plastic dug into her skin, but she refused to give them the satisfaction of pain. "You still think you're in charge?" she asked quietly. Derek forced a smirk. "We are. You don't belong here." Before she could respond, Lisa's front door opened. She stepped out onto the porch, wiping her hands on a towel, eyes narrowing when she saw the crowd. Her smile faded instantly. "Monica?" she called, confusion bleeding into alarm. She rushed forward, her voice rising. "What are you doing to her?" Chad raised a hand like a traffic cop. "Ma'am, stay back. We've got a trespasser situation under control." Lisa froze halfway down the driveway, shock rippling across her face. "Trespasser? Are you out of your minds? She's my guest. I buzzed her in myself." The words hit the street like a thunderclap. Gasps rose from the onlookers. The woman recording zoomed in. The man with the dog muttered, "Told you so." Derek's mouth opened, then shut again. Chad turned red, his authority unraveling in real time. She didn't identify herself properly," he stammered. "We were just making sure." Monica cut in, her voice cool as steel. "You ignored me when I told you I was a guest. You ignored everyone here. You wanted a show. Well, congratulations, you've got one." The sirens grew louder now, swelling until the wail filled every corner of the cul-de-sac. Blue and red. Light washed over the pavement as a patrol cruiser rounded the corner and stopped at the edge of the crowd. 2 deputies stepped out, flashlights cutting across the driveways. Chad puffed his chest, waving his arms like he was in command. "Over here, officers. We detained a trespasser. She resisted. We secured her until you arrived." The taller deputy, name tag glinting, Deputy Rollins, walked forward slowly. His light landed on Monica, sitting calmly on the curb, wrists cinched in white plastic ties. His brow furrowed. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked. Before she could answer, Derek jumped in. "We had to restrain her. She was being non-compliant. We've had issues with suspicious activity around here, so we stepped up." Rollins didn't reply. He turned his light from Monica's face to their mismatched vests, to the shaky patches that read Neighborhood Patrol. The silence between each glance felt heavier than words. Monica raised her voice just enough to cut through the murmurs. "Deputy, these men have just unlawfully detained me on private property. I told them repeatedly I was a guest. I also told them they didn't have the right to touch me." Rollins's flashlight paused on her wrists. Then his expression changed. Recognition flickered in his eyes. "Captain Hayes?" he asked carefully. The crowd fell silent. Chad blinked. "Wait, what did you just say?" Monica lifted her chin. "Captain Monica Hayes, Atlanta Metropolitan Police Department, badge number 23761. A ripple of disbelief spread through the onlookers. Someone gasped. Another whispered, "She's a cop?" Chad stepped back as if burned. Derek's mouth opened, then froze in a grimace. Rollins's tone sharpened instantly. "You two detained an officer of the law?" Derek stuttered. She didn't say who she was. We thought." Lisa's voice cut in, shaking with anger. "You didn't think. You harassed my friend, tied her up in front of half the neighborhood, and ignored everyone who told you to stop." Rollins dropped to one knee and cut the ties from Monica's wrists with a flick of his knife. The plastic fell away with a snap, leaving red marks across her skin. He helped her to her feet. "You shouldn't have had to go through that," he said quietly. Chad backed up a step. "Look, we were just trying to protect the neighborhood." "Protect it from what?" Monica's voice rose, calm but sharp enough to slice through his excuse. "From a woman walking to her friend's door? from someone who didn't fit your idea of who belongs here. The weight of her words hit the crowd like a wave. Neighbors looked away, ashamed. Rollins faced the men, his tone all authority now. You're both being detained for questioning. Hand over your IDs. Derek's hand shook as he pulled out his wallet. Are we under arrest? Not yet, Rollins said, but you will be if you keep talking. Chad muttered something under his breath, but it didn't matter anymore. The illusion was broken. The street they thought they ruled was no longer theirs. Lisa stepped closer to Monica, her voice trembling. Are you okay? They actually tied you up? Monica nodded once. I'm fine, but this wasn't just about me. They needed to be exposed. The woman with the phone lowered her camera slightly. Don't worry, she said. It's all here. Every word, every second. The deputies guided Chad and Derek toward the cruiser, the weight of silence trailing behind them. As the doors slammed shut, the sound echoed through the night, final, heavy, undeniable. But Monica wasn't done. She turned to the gathered neighbors, her voice low but resolute. This isn't just about two men playing cop. This is about what happens when we let fear and ego dress up as authority. Nobody spoke. They didn't have to. The truth was already sitting heavy in the air. Rollins nodded to her before heading back to his patrol car. The flashing lights began to fade as he pulled away, leaving only the hush of a neighborhood that had just seen itself in a mirror and didn't like what it saw. Yet the story was far from over. Because by morning, those lights would not just fade from this street. They'd explode across every screen in America. And what began as humiliation for one woman would become a turning point for everyone watching. By sunrise, Brookhaven Heights no longer felt like a quiet suburb. It felt like the center of a storm. The video hit social media before dawn. A shaky phone clip, barely 2 minutes long, but it carried more power than either Chad or Derek had ever held in their lives. The footage showed Monica standing calm, her wrists bound, the men barking orders. And then the moment of truth, her steady voice revealing who she was. Captain Monica Hayes, Atlanta Metropolitan Police Department. Those words became a spark. Within hours, the video spread across platforms like wildfire. Headlines flooded timelines. Fake neighborhood patrol arrests off-duty police captain. Comment sections ignited. News anchors replayed the footage on morning broadcasts, and the same question echoed everywhere. How could something like this happen in broad daylight, in front of witnesses, in a gated community? Inside Lisa's kitchen, Monica sat at the table scrolling through her phone. The grooves on her wrists were faint now, but they ached. Her notifications were endless. Calls from colleagues, messages from journalists, support from strangers. Lisa hovered near the window, peeking through the blinds. There are cameras outside, she said softly. Actual news vans. Monica, it's everywhere. Monica set the phone down, her voice calm but tired. I knew it would spread. I just didn't think it would happen this fast. Lisa turned from the window. You have to say something. Everyone's waiting to hear from you. Monica looked up. I will, but not yet. People need to see it for what it is before I speak. Outside, the neighborhood looked unchanged. Same manicured lawns, same porches. But beneath the surface, everything had shifted. Neighbors avoided each other's eyes. Conversations that once floated easily now fell into uneasy silence. Meanwhile, the video continued to climb. News channels ran side-by-side comparisons of the men's cheap vests and official police gear. Commentators dissected every frame. The internet dug deep, unearthing photos of Chad and Derek posing in tactical outfits months earlier, boasting about protecting their neighborhood. By mid-afternoon, their names were trending. Their employers issued statements condemning their actions. Both men were suspended before lunch and fired before dinner. Lisa scrolled through one article, shaking her head. They're saying it was all a misunderstanding, that they were just trying to keep the peace. Monica gave a humorless smile. That's always the story. Fear dressed up as protection. Messages poured in from officers she had worked with, each one a mix of outrage and admiration. One read, "You handled yourself with more grace than I ever could have." Another said, "They picked the wrong person to humiliate." By evening, a press conference took place outside the county courthouse. District Attorney Vanessa Price stood before a wall of microphones, her tone firm. This office will not tolerate impersonation of law enforcement, unlawful restraint, or racial intimidation under any circumstance. What happened in Brookhaven Heights was not a misunderstanding, it was a violation of law and of basic decency. Reporters shouted questions. She didn't flinch. Charges have been filed, she continued. Both individuals are in custody and will face prosecution. The video of that statement went viral, too. That night, as the noise of the outside world roared, Monica and Lisa sat on the back porch in silence. The cicadas hummed softly, the same way they had before everything changed. Lisa finally spoke. "Do you realize what you've started?" Monica looked out at the dark yard. "I didn't start anything, they did. I just didn't back down." Lisa's eyes softened. "Still, people are listening now." "Really listening?" Monica nodded slowly. "Good, because this isn't about me. It's about every person who's ever been told they don't belong. About every time silence made space for injustice." From somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed again, faint but familiar. It reminded her of that night, the moment the flashing lights turned everything upside down. She rubbed the marks on her wrists absent-mindedly. "They thought they could humiliate me," she said quietly. "But humiliation only lasts a moment. Truth lasts a lifetime." Lisa reached across the table, resting her hand over Monica's. "So what happens next?" Monica looked toward the horizon, where the faint glow of the city shimmered in the dark. "Now," she said, "the country decides what kind of authority it wants to believe in, the kind that serves or the kind that controls." And she was right. Across the nation, talk shows debated, opinion columns dissected, and communities looked inward. Some people defended the men, insisting they were just overzealous. Others saw the deeper truth, that prejudice can wear a uniform even when it's fake. In Brookhaven Heights, the Homeowners Association called an emergency meeting. The clubhouse overflowed with residents, angry, embarrassed, defensive. Some shouted for stricter rules on neighborhood patrols. Others demanded that the board resign for letting two amateurs play cop unchecked. By the end of the meeting, one resolution was unanimous. The fake patrol program was permanently disbanded. But for Monica, the victory felt hollow. She hadn't set out to prove anything. She had only wanted to visit a friend. Now her name was everywhere. Her face was on every major network. And while strangers online called her brave, she knew the truth was heavier than that. It wasn't bravery that had kept her calm. It was exhaustion. Years of knowing that even a badge didn't always protect her from suspicion. The next morning, she woke to a dozen new interview requests. She ignored them all. Instead, she sat by the window with a cup of coffee, watching sunlight spill across the lawn where everything had unfolded. The grass looked ordinary again. Peaceful. But she knew better. That street would never be the same, and neither would she. She took a slow breath, the kind that clears the fog of memory, and whispered to herself, "This time, they chose the wrong woman." But deep down, she also knew they could have chosen anyone, and next time someone else might not be so lucky. By the end of the week, the story had stretched far beyond Georgia. News anchors in New York, Los Angeles, and London were saying her name. Talk shows replayed the clip, pausing at the moment Monica announced her rank. Commentators argued about race, authority, and the blurred line between fear and power. Every hour brought new attention. Hashtags filled timelines. Civil rights groups used her story as a rallying cry. Politicians tweeted statements about accountability. The world had taken what happened in that small cul-de-sac and turned it into a mirror, forcing everyone to look. But inside Lisa's home, things were quiet. The blinds were drawn. The phone never stopped ringing. Monica sat on the couch with her laptop open, scrolling through articles she never asked for. Each headline carried her name like a badge she didn't want to wear. Lisa came in from the kitchen, her voice gentle. "You should eat something." "I'm fine," Monica said, though her untouched plate said otherwise. Lisa sat beside her. "They're holding another press conference this afternoon. They're calling it an update." Monica shut her laptop. "I already know what it'll say. Charges confirmed. Public outrage continues. Nothing changes until the cameras leave." Lisa hesitated. "You don't believe it made a difference?" Monica looked at her hands, tracing the faint lines still visible on her wrists. "It made noise. But change isn't noise. It's what happens when the noise fades and people still care. The knock at the door came before either of them could speak again. Lisa went to open it, revealing a reporter standing on the porch, microphone in hand, expression earnest. "Captain Hayes," she said, "people all over the country are calling you a symbol of restraint and courage. Do you have a message for them?" For a moment, Monica considered closing the door, but then she stepped forward, meeting the reporter's gaze. "Tell them this," she said. "Authority isn't a costume. It's a responsibility. Those men didn't just violate my rights. They violated the trust that keeps communities safe. And if we don't hold people accountable for pretending to be protectors, we'll keep repeating this cycle, over and over." The reporter nodded, visibly moved. "Do you forgive them?" Monica's answer was steady, unflinching. "Forgiveness isn't the point. Understanding is. And they don't understand what real authority is meant to protect." The interview lasted only a few minutes, but it spread faster than she expected. Her words echoed online. Authority isn't a costume. It's a responsibility. By evening, even the sheriff's office released a statement. Impersonating law enforcement will never be tolerated. This case is a wake-up call for every community. Chad and Derek were no longer just neighborhood bullies. They were faces on mugshots, their fake courage stripped away under fluorescent lights. Their lawyers blamed adrenaline, poor judgment, misunderstanding. But the videos and the witnesses told another story, one that couldn't be explained away. Monica didn't watch their court hearing. She didn't need to. Justice, she knew, didn't always arrive in a courtroom. Sometimes it arrived in the silence of reflection, in the unease of a community forced to see itself. That night, she and Lisa sat outside again, the air cooler now, the street calm. The same neighbors who had once stayed behind their windows were walking by, some waving awkwardly, others stopping to say thank you. One woman paused by the porch, holding her phone. "I showed your video to my kids," she said quietly. "They needed to see what real calm looks like." Monica smiled faintly. "Then it was worth it." After the woman left, Lisa leaned back in her chair, studying her friend. "Do you think this changes anything long-term?" Monica's gaze drifted across the street where it all happened. "It might not change everyone," she said, "but maybe it makes a few people stop before they decide they have the right to control someone else. That's how change begins, with hesitation." For a moment, they just listened to the night. The faint hum of insects, the soft rustle of leaves, the faraway sound of cars on the highway. Monica finally broke the silence. "You know, when they grabbed me, I wasn't afraid of being hurt. I was afraid of what would happen if I fought back. I thought about every headline I've ever read about people who didn't survive misunderstandings like that." Lisa looked at her, eyes glassy. "But you did survive. You stayed calm. You turned it around." Monica nodded. "Yes, but that's the problem. I had to be perfect to survive something that should never have happened at all." The truth of that hung in the air, heavy, real. The following morning, Monica finally decided to speak publicly, not through a network but in her own words. She sat at Lisa's dining table, opened her phone, and recorded a short message. No lights, no staging, no script, just her voice. "No one should be handcuffed by fear or judged by appearance," she said. "Real power protects. It doesn't humiliate. Real courage is staying calm when the world expects you to break, and real accountability is when silence ends and people start to act." She posted it, then set the phone aside and exhaled. For the first time since that night, the weight on her chest felt lighter. The video spread again, not like before, with outrage, but with quiet respect. Comments filled with gratitude, reflection, and sometimes guilt. People admitted they had stood by in moments when they should have spoken. Others promised they wouldn't stay silent again. Weeks later, the court announced the final verdict. Both men were convicted on multiple counts: impersonating an officer, unlawful detention, and assault. They were sentenced to serve time and perform community service under supervision. When the news broke, Monica was at the station finishing paperwork. A young rookie approached her shyly. "Captain Hayes," he said, "what you did, it changed the way I think about authority." She looked up, smiled faintly. "Then make sure you never forget it. That's how you honor what happened." That evening, back at Lisa's, they watched the sunset fade over the quiet street where everything had begun. The same porches, the same sidewalks, but something in the air felt different. A little heavier, a little wiser. Lisa broke the silence. "Do you think you'll ever move past it?" Monica watched the last of the light disappear. No, she said softly. And maybe I shouldn't. Some lessons aren't meant to fade. They're meant to remind us what happens when power forgets its purpose. As the first stars appeared above the rooftops, she whispered almost to herself, "Never again." And somewhere out there, the clip of her words, her calm and her quiet defiance continued to travel, reminding everyone who watched that real strength doesn't shout. It stands.